Hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Tuesday. I almost said Monday, but it is Tuesday after the long holiday. Markets caught a little bit of volatility today. You know, the main story, we got two things going on. So two main stories. We've got a pretty large hurricane developing. Seems like it's going to be round two of another one. So that's problem number one, and then problem number two, which was all weekend, which I think everybody knows about, is North Korea. So usually when it's one thing, sometimes the market can kind of shake it off, but two, sometimes it causes some volatility. So we definitely got that today. S&P, not down that much. Again, the usual bounce from the lows today. I'll look at these charts in a minute. The VIX did go up. The VIX really got to a low level before the holiday weekend. So you can see it's still selling off here after hours. We did get to a high of 14 bucks. I did do a small trade. I said if the VIX gets all the way up to a 14, which I think at one point we were over like 33%, the VIX was up. I mean, it's a pretty decent move from 10, which is where we were on Friday. So move all the way up to 14. And yeah, I did sell a little bit of EXX call spreads. I generally do that whenever the VIX spikes up a little bit. So that was one trade that I did today. We'll kind of look at. I'll go ahead and now that we looked at the VIX. Well, actually, before I look at the equity charts, a couple of things were a little bit troubling. Bonds were well bid all day long today. They finally took out this level in TLT. They kind of took out this hump here, but TLT was at one plus 1.6% on the day. So that's a really big day. I'm trying to look to see when the last time we moved that much intraday. It hasn't happened in a long time, so pretty decent move for bonds. They were, like I said, bid all day from morning to close. They just continue to kind of grind higher. You could see that with the 30-year bonds futures, which also got above this level, and making a decent move higher. Same thing with gold. Gold, not as much, up 1%, but I mentioned once we got above this trend line, which we were consolidating for a while, this 1300 level, and sometimes it's gold acts. There's a psychological level of big round numbers. So above 1300 and boom, since we've gone. So I've been long GDX, another area that went up. So it was all the big risk off. I mean, gold miners finished up pretty much on the highs of the day as well, up 2%. So that trade's working out for me pretty well. Also the yen, really declined, got hit pretty hard in the middle of last week. It's now back to those levels. So a big move, was up close to 1%, maybe a little bit off those highs. Watch for the yen to go higher. So I'm long FXY. Those are my two safety plays, FXY and GDX. So FXY is the ETF, but it looks like we're getting close to an MACD crossover there. So that's kind of gives you a sense of how much risk off I would say it was. And these really, besides the VIX selling off at the end of the day, these didn't really. The yen didn't, bonds didn't, and gold didn't. So we'll see what we get for the next of the week, for the rest of the week. So S&P, if we go to the daily chart, kind of a doji looking chart at this point. It's going to be a little bit different between S&P or SPY and S&P futures, because S&P futures were open on the holiday. So that's going to look a little bit different there if you look at the SPY. Qs, I think Qs, even though they fell a little bit more today, they were down 90 basis points. They held support. So when we look over to a couple levels here. First of all, this 144.26 that held. I would watch that level. This is the September value area, so if we get a break into here. I wouldn't say horrible, but back into the chop zone, I would say. Qs also, I thought found some support. Maybe it was NQ. I think it's going to be a little bit different value area. Nope, not so much there. Maybe it was the 5 minute. Let's see. I think we sliced through this pretty decently. It was Apple today. That's what it was. So if we go to the Apple on the 1 hour, you can see that Apple went through this week's value area and reclaimed it. And you found a little bit of support right here. So a little bit move back into to value for Apple. I like value. Excuse me. I like Apple for the week as a. I still think it has a possibility of running into the event for next week. So I think Apple can do that. Resistance is 164.55 for Apple for the week. Let me just finish up here. Small caps, small caps really were holding in there pretty well, and then they started to really sell off right around 10 o'clock, and then onward. So they're in value. They started the week above value. They're back in there. Looking at the daily chart, they actually fell into the value area for September. So kind of gave back a couple days of price action towards the end of the week. Why did that happen for small caps? Really because of the banks. The banks were the story. This is where the volatility was today. So, a little bit of a crawlback last week. We've kind of been talking about how banks have been pretty weak, but you look at regional banks, they're probably back below the 200-day moving average, dividend adjusted. So if you go to KRE, and we'll see this versus the 200. Yeah, back. Actually, sorry, that did not get over the 200. Back above the 200-day moving average. So really weak. The regional banks. They finished down 3% on the day, and I would say looking pretty nasty. So I think banks are the area that you want to watch. So for worries, I would say. Look at the insurance ETF today, down 3.3%. I would love to look for a play that when the whole group gets sold off like this on worries of the hurricane, there's going to be a name in here, a name or two that's probably got sold off a little bit too hard in sympathy. So I would watch. We really didn't see any major call buying in this group. I would maybe watch for that tomorrow. Maybe somebody goes after some calls and a name that got beaten up within the group. But the insurance group has been really strong all year long. Really nice trend. Well, that's broke below the 200-day moving average today, so pretty ugly looking. Let's see if that's with dividends. Yeah, right at the 200-day moving average. It looks like it's a break under for that's the insurance ETF KIE. So that was the negative for the day. The positive, we talked about the gold miners; those were the best of the day. Energy names also did pretty good. OIH, which we saw some call buying in OIH. Kind of tough to make sense of these oil charts that are in big downtrends. I've drawn this XLE downtrend, so we're back above it. You do have a MACD crossover, so we're back above this trend line. If I would, there's not really much support that I would say there is for XLE or OIH. So for me, I think it's got to do a little bit more. It's got to get above the value area. But here was the trade that we saw in OIH earlier the day, which was 9,000 of the October 24 calls that went up. These went up in two blocks today. So there was some call buying, there was some put selling, in some other energy names. So I think that was one of the key trades of the day. There was a lot of, speaking of GDX, there was a lot of GDX calls that went up today. But right around midday, I would say there was the March 30 calls, 15,000 of those traded, and then also I think out in March we saw another trade as well. I think this was it here, March 29 calls, which were swept. So a lot of heavy buying in gold miners today. Yeah, here it is, sweep opening. This one really caught my eye. This block at 10,000. Oops, those are puts for the week. Or for September 22nd. This one caught my eye right away, but the 29s really went up aggressively. So those were certainly interesting. In the morning, we saw mostly the usual. I don't want to say garbage, but the usual weekly stuff. So there was some goo calls that went up. There was some weekly Disneys that went up. I tried this trade today just for a quick scalp. It didn't work. We talked about the OIH. There was some UN. There's actually double this. So there was 1,000 contracts that went up in UN. Sorry, not UNH. UN Unilever. just update my sheet here, but there was 1,000 calls that went up pretty aggressively. So not a huge order, basically just going out to next week. There was also a little bit of Tesla stuff. This trade caught my eyes as well. Amazon 11, the January 1150 1200 call spread, so pretty far up there. Decent move by January. Somebody's looking for Amazon. We talked about GDX. Trip, this was a hell of a trade today. Really aggressive calls that went up midday today. This thing is back above the 200-day moving average, it looks like. So TripAdvisor, let's just take a look at Trip here with all the moving averages. Yeah, break above the 200-day moving average. So if you want to go long TripAdvisor, there you go. Don't really see any of the moving averages crossing over, which I would like. I'd like to see the 50 cross over the 100. That would be great. You also have these purple lines, which are version pointing controls that it may be headed towards. But hey, if you want to go long Trip, you got your stop in place, which would be the 200-day moving average. So real nice trade today. Again, not I think these were October's. So further to that, ALGN, some next week's calls going up, a little bit of Splunk going up, a little bit of UVXY calls were bought for next week. This is another, I would say, kind of maybe called the trade of the day. I took this trade at the end of the day. This is a cruise line, just like I was saying for insurers, I was waiting for somebody to buy some calls in the space in a group that really got beaten up. So this was another group that got beaten up pretty bad. The transports, the cruise lines, CCL saw puts today, but this kind of came in at towards the end of the day. Norwegian Cruise Line. They do have cruises to the Caribbean, but they also have cruises all over the world. So this has been a pretty good name on option activity. So I did take this trade, and I did not take it off at all. So I'm wearing this one, October 60 calls. I got close to hitting a target in it, but I decided to keep it on. T-Mobile, they bought some out of the money calls in T-Mobile a couple times today. These are all the way up to the 770. I think T-Mobile's trading around $63, so pretty decent move that they're looking for. Hence, the price was only around 32 cents. CSX, they went after those a couple times, so another rail name or another transport name seeing activity. And then there was a lot of puts. You could kind of see there was another trade that caught my eye too. A lot of them, a lot of international ETFs as well saw some put activity as well. EWY was in there, the South Korea ETF, which has been seeing steady put buying like this. Nothing huge, but January 50 puts went up. So some Nike puts went up as well. So like I said, these are mostly from this morning. MNK puts. So there was definitely a decent amount. You could see AAL puts were also bought right around the open. But so pretty heavy day, I would say, for option activity. There was a little bit of dip buying in that NCLH, but mainly it was on the put side. It was your fear trades. There was also a lot of SPY, Qs, and IWM puts that were bought in the first half of the day. So we'll see how it shakes out. Again, I would keep an eye on bonds, gold, and the yen. So even though the VIX came in pretty hard today, I'm not convinced that we're done with volatility for the week. All right, so that's today's recap. Have a great night. See you back on Wednesday morning. Oh, by the way, we're also doing a webinar. It should be on my Twitter page. So we're doing a webinar tomorrow at 6 o'clock. If you're interested to know, I talk about value areas every day. These red, yellow, and blue, red, yellow, and green lines. So I'm going to go into some detail about what they mean, how to use them in your trading. That's tomorrow at 6 p.m. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.